Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Focal Points. Today, our special guest is Henrietta, or she goes by Hetty Samoas. And unfortunately, her son did suffer from COVID-19 mRNA vaccine induced myocarditis, pericarditis, and aortic dissection, unfortunately, leading to his sudden death about 16 days after the shot. And so, his mother, Hetty, has come on the show, and she's going to tell the story, and she's going to be raising awareness to the fact that these injections kill people. They impact families, and this isn't going away. And we're going to continue to expose this. So, Henrietta, tell us a bit about what happened.
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but what I am is a mother on a mission because on May 6th, 2021, I became a bereaved mother when my beautiful, wonderful 34-year-old son died suddenly in Seattle. He was working there at Amazon, and he died suddenly with no explanation. So it was what happened was on the 20th of April, he received his first and only Pfizer shot. About 6 days later, I was talking to him because my son Victor would call me like 2 or 3 times a day. He was a wonderful son. He called his whole family, consistently. And he told me he had been experiencing a headache and an ongoing headache. And I asked him if he thought it was the vaccine. He says, no, I don't think so. And then I didn't hear anything else. And that was it. Then on the evening of May 5th, which is now the 15th day after his first vaccine, he was happy. I talked to him twice. He was laughing. His girlfriend had gotten a promotion, so they were actually dancing in their living room, celebrating, and then they went out to dinner. After exactly when he started experiencing gastro issues, and then through my research, I found out that when you're having an aortic dissection, that is sometimes one of the first symptoms. About 1:30 in the morning, and I know this from his girlfriend, he called the ambulance because he was experiencing chest pain, jaw numbness, and we later found out through his Apple Watch that his heart had been racing at 190 beats per minute. So he got called the ambulance himself. He woke up his girlfriend to tell her, I'm going to go get checked out, but don't worry, I'll be back. I'll call you from the hospital. He went down to meet the emergency medical people, the ambulance. I don't know why they didn't come up to the apartment, but I guess he said he could go down, and he went down. They put in their notes that he was walking and talking, and he was oriented. He was alert and oriented. So yes, he was feeling pain, but he wasn't like clutching himself or barely breathing or anything like that. They sat him down on a bench in front of the apartment building, and his girlfriend raced down, and he introduced his girlfriend to the medical service people, and they were taking his vitals at that point, and he collapsed. He collapsed, and he became unresponsive, and they started working on him. They brought him to Harborview Medical Hospital in Seattle, and there they did everything they could to possibly revive him. I know he arrived at the hospital at 2:26 because I have that in the medical records, although I personally have not been able to read that. It's too traumatic. But and then around 3:15, the doctor came out and told his girlfriend that he had passed away. And so that was the time of death, 3:15. So as you can see, from the time he called and started experiencing these symptoms and to his death, it was very quick. So this is what you call an acute aortic dissection. Um, because some people have aortic dissections, and if they catch it in time, it's a more slow moving and they can save these people. Unfortunately, in my son's case, they couldn't. The first question that the ER doctor asked his girlfriend was, did he have the COVID vaccine? Now, this was early on. This was in May. So already they must have been seeing something in the hospitals to alert them, because he thought my son had a pulmonary embolism just by the nature of how quickly everything happened, because he was asymptomatic before this. Um, so, his girlfriend called me. I'm New York time. It was about a quarter to 7 at that point by the time she got a hold of me. And, we were just in shock and disbelief, and it's been a nightmare. It's been a nightmare. We had to race over to, Washington State. Um, we got there, and they had already performed an autopsy. I'm grateful that they did. They had to do the autopsy because of the manner in which he died. So a young person, he was 34, so suddenly, that they were required to by state law. So in that sense, I'm grateful, because I don't know if I personally could have given the go ahead for an autopsy. So they did do an autopsy, and then they decided it was not pulmonary embolism. It was an acute aortic dissection. My husband and I spoke to the coroner after we spoke to him then. My husband spoke to him then. And later, when we got the autopsy report, we asked further questions. We asked, did he have an aneurysm? Because, an aneurysm can lead to an aortic dissection. No. Was he dilated? No. So he didn't have, even at that point, a lot of the things you would expect to find, but he did have an acute dissection. Um, and so immediately, my brother, who was at least still he was thinking straight. He says, "This was the vaccine. This was definitely the vaccine." And I believed it as well, but everybody else, and my husband did too, and everybody else kind of said, maybe, maybe not, but we knew it was. So we did an enormous amount of research on inflammation and inflammatory responses, because you don't have an aortic dissection without inflammation. We knew you needed IL-6, you needed all these other cytokines, inflammatory cytokines. The one thing that I am grateful to the coroner for is that initially he thought perhaps this was a genetic defect in my son, because he didn't see anything. He said my son's heart was healthy. It didn't show evidence of high blood pressure. And so he was a little bit at a loss as to why. Okay. So we did the genetic testing. We did genetic testing in Washington State. We did it over here in the East Coast at a top university. Both of my son's DNA genetic tests came back negative, nothing clinically relevant. That he didn't have Ehlers-Danlos, he didn't have Marfan's, he didn't have any of those genetic predispositions. Myself, my husband, and my other children were all tested as well. And likewise, there was nothing. I said, well, okay, that rules out genetics. So the only thing this can possibly be is the vaccine. So we started talking to a lot of people, writing to a lot of people. I mean, my husband even wrote to, Dr. Gill over in Connecticut. We wrote to everybody. And, we finally, and we also went to show my son's records to aortic specialist, high level aortic specialists. And they said, based on his echoes and everything else, there was there's nothing there that would have indicated that he was at risk for an aortic dissection, at least not at this point in his life. So, we did the toxicology report also came back negative. My son didn't do drugs or anything like that. So, I mean, he was a really hardworking person. Just to backtrack, I mean, he was a graduate of Boston College. He started 2 medical startups after he finished his MBA at Kellogg. He was a trailblazer. He worked at, a really high level senior position at Amazon, and that's why he was over in Seattle. So we then said, okay, we don't have anything other. Now we have to go look at his blood and his tissues. So we got a top university, one of the top 3 universities in the country, to look at his blood serum. We got a 42-page report. indicating inflammatory cytokines, complements, all the things they didn't look for everything, but most of the things that they would look for, and it showed inflammatory markers through the roof. And when we later subsequently spoke to the doctor that was on the paper, that we eventually got published, he said that he treated vaccine injured people, and some of the markers he was seeing in my son's report were definitely the markers he would see in vaccine injured people. So we have that, and so that pretty much convinced me. But then I knew that I wanted to have histology done because it had never been done. I at that point had made contact with a doctor here in the United States, probably the only one that was doing things. And I also started working with Heather Hudson, whose son is also very sick and who has enormous research on the LNPs. And she explained the LNPs to me, and she said this probably was an inflammatory reaction caused by the LNPs as well as the spike, because he had eosinophilic myocarditis, which we found out later. At any rate, I started working with this particular doctor, but he couldn't complete the work because they were all these doctors were just like Dr. Nicola. They were all being maligned. So we eventually sent his tissues to Germany because people knew about, and I knew about Dr. Arnie Burkhardt through my research. And he's the doctor that had done all the autopsy studies in Germany and had realized that the mRNA vaccine was killing people. And people, he actually, some of the postmortem autopsies he did, he found 2 or 3 that were aortic dissections, or so it all lined up. At any rate, this particular German pathologist was kind enough to do it, and we sent the tissues over, and I was expecting and looking for spike protein, but not only did he find spike protein, he also found myocarditis, pericarditis, and spike protein in the aorta. So obviously, my son had a massive, massive inflammatory event by the LMPs, the mRNA, the spike. The spike obviously damaged the endothelium and was what ultimately killed him with the dissection. Maybe he would have died of myocarditis as well. I don't know, but he did have a tear in his aorta, which caused hemopericardium and cardiac tamponade, which basically you really can't come back from. It's a very hard thing to diagnose. So once we got the information from the pathologist, I now had the genetic reports. I had the autopsy, I had the histology, I had the toxicology, I had the genetics, I had all of this stuff, and the and I wanted a paper written, and the paper was put together by the individuals you see there, Dr. Balbona, Heather Hudson, Dr. Jancy Lindsay. I would say that Heather Hudson, as I mentioned, she's an expert on the LNPs, and she put together a good, most of the paper with Dr. Balbona reviewing it, and a little bit Dr. Lindsay. And then we went through trying to get it published. And as you well know, it's sometimes a difficult journey. It got peer reviewed at the British Medical Journal and almost was published there, but at the last minute, they said they don't do case studies. Well, they didn't let us know beforehand, at least not the division they were in. So we ultimately had it published with, OPAST, and this is where it is. And it's there for everybody to look at, to see that and realize that these deaths are occurring. However, very few people are going through the lengths that my husband and I have gone through to get to the truth. I have to say my husband and I work, on this since the beginning, because my son Victor was a wonderful son. He deserves the attention to see why he died, and also ultimately justice, because this was criminal. They knew from the clinical reports, they knew from the first month of the rollout, and they knew from 20 years of research that the mRNA platform was going to be toxic and dangerous to people, but they couldn't get it through the FDA, so they had to create an emergency. And in order to get emergency use authorization, and the emergency was to keep making sure that everybody and their brother was diagnosed as having had COVID, even if they died in a motorcycle accident. So it created the fear, and it created, the frenzy for everybody to get the vaccine. And at the same time, they maligned the doctors, and they maligned the therapeutics that were working, such as ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. And Dr. McCullough knows this well because I was in Mississippi with him for the Stop the Shots organized by Dr. Witcher. And I met two doctors there that spoke and said that they saved all their COVID patients with ivermectin, azithromycin, zinc, and whatever the protocols were. And these are upward of 10,000 each. There were two doctors that spoke. And I'm saying to myself, well, we could have saved most, maybe not all, most of the COVID patients if we had used these protocols and not given them remdesivir or intubated them and literally killed them. And at the same time, we didn't have to kill people with this very dangerous vaccine, which now should be pulled from the market. The whole mRNA technology should be pulled from the market. But of course, this is the billion-dollar baby that they want to keep. And this is what we all have to fight against.
Wow. Well, Hetty, again, I'm so sorry for your loss. Truly, this is really is a tragedy, as a result of the military countermeasure campaign of developing these disastrous monster mRNA shots that have killed far too many people. And you have been so brave and continue to persist and pursue because you wanted justice and you wanted to find the truth to warn other parents. And your result is a clear case. You have found that this vaccine directly did unfortunately result in your son's death. You persisted, and then this is what was found, and our audience can see right here. That is the vaccine spike protein directly in the cardiac tissue. And our FDA still doesn't even say that this can happen. They still pretend that this is misinformation or this isn't true. Um, that needs to stop, right? This
Absolutely.
is real,
This
and
is real.
this is
And
real.
this is real. This has happened. And the only reason more people don't know the truth about the deaths of those people that have died in their families is because they haven't done autopsies or histology. So the administrations can hide behind, the health agencies can hide behind, well, this is rare. Well, of course it's rare if you're not looking for it. You're not finding it. And to your point about the FDA, I got very involved with React 19, it's a wonderful organization for people that are vaccine injured and also includes the bereaved. I've gone to Washington several times to advocate for moving the vaccine from the CICP, which is useless, and putting it on the VICP. I've met Senator Johnson in the course of those advocacy trips. But on one of those trips, we went before the FDA, before Peter Marks. We presented our cases. I presented mine because mine was a death. Everybody else there was practically in wheelchairs. They're all suffering from adverse events. And he's just looking at us and pretty much dismissing us and saying he doesn't see the signals. And one of the things that clued me in is he's not seeing the signals because, that they want to muddy the waters by saying it's all long COVID. Not to say long COVID doesn't exist, but a lot of these cases are not long COVID. They're vaccine injuries. And by having so many people take the vaccine, I mean, and now they've all had COVID. Now, it's hard to determine. But my son, important point here, never had COVID. So he He had a negative nucleocapsid test that Dr. Mortz did the nucleocapsid test. At the time of death, they did a PCR test. It was negative. And I know I spoke to him every day. And his girlfriend confirmed it. They never had COVID. They were in fear. They wore their masks, even though they're not, you know, effective, but they never had COVID. So this is a case where you can't say, oh, well, it could be COVID, because it wasn't. There's no nucleocapsid. And that's why this case is also so important, because they can't blame it, as they usually try to do, on the fact that a person has had COVID. So I would say most times it's a vaccine injury. Maybe sometimes it is COVID, but now they've muddied the waters, and that's what Peter Marks said. Well, this could, during the course of this meeting, well, this could be from COVID too. So I knew that was going to be their fallback.
Yes, yes. They like to always claim that, oh, well, COVID is way more dangerous. And so, even though the vaccines are still dangerous, they will protect you more so. And it's absolutely nonsense. We now understand that the vaccines are way more dangerous than the now mild uh, Omicron infections.
Oh,
And
and one other point. I mean, they keep saying, and that's because I went to the Ron Johnson hearing, and I was very happy to see that Dr. McCullough addressed the now pivot lie, because before it was safe and effective. Now, maybe not so safe and maybe not so effective, but hey, we saved millions of lives. But you know what? That's a lie too, because and Ron Johnson showed it, and Dr. McCullough showed it, and I knew it because the variant had gotten much weaker. At the point that Victor took his vaccine, I was even wondering whether he should have taken it, because it was no longer, as deadly. And then, so the vaccine came in sort of like in that period of time. So it looked like it was working for like 2 months, but it was the fact that the variant was less, but then 2 or 3 months later, all of a sudden we had a spike in deaths again. Well, what was that coming from? Obviously, the vaccine was now kicking into the people that had taken it. My son took it 2 weeks after, died 2 weeks after the vaccine. In their literature, he's considered unvaccinated because it's not 2 weeks after the second vaccine. So that's where they came up with the great lie of the pandemic of the unvaccinated. So, and so they muddied all the statistics and all the figures. People have died. People have been injured. This was an orchestrated attack on humanity. This was fraud perpetrated by our government, by the pharmaceutical industry, by our medical establishment, by the media. And they perpetrated the lie of safe and effective. And here in my state in New York, the governor every day made sure he was online telling us how many thousands of deaths there were. And later on, we found out a lot of things that could be dismissive of the fact that those were really happening. But it instilled the fear in the public that caused, people to run out, lose their critical thinking skills, because we weren't sure, but we couldn't decide because there was not enough information out there. It was censored. You had people like the Great Barrington Declaration, and we were looking at that, but then we were saying, well, what if, these quote fringe virologists are wrong, and shouldn't we trust the FDA? Blah, blah, blah. No, we shouldn't trust the FDA. We shouldn't trust the CDC, and we shouldn't trust, the NIH. And we now are in a situation where the trust is gone. Hopefully, slowly it will come back, but they have to start doing the black box warnings. They have to do all the things that they're supposed to do.
they have to start doing all of that. And again, I just want to solidify this point for everybody watching. This is real. This is a real vaccine, or not vaccine. This is a real mRNA injection death. There have been many thousands of these deaths. In fact, millions are likely now based on current estimations. Um, so, and each of these deaths affects an entire family, right? So these again, this is real. I just want that in people's heads. This has to be addressed now, and we can't let go and let them keep improving novel mRNA boosters that are going to harm even more people, even more young, healthy adults. This is ridiculous. And so, Hetty, I want you to give us your final words here. What do you want to tell the public?
Well, first of all, never to take another mRNA vaccine. Never fall for the fear they're going to start perpetrating against, because they're going to come up with more, there's going to be more variants, and they're going to come up with more vaccines that are going to help you. And people shouldn't fall for all of that, because, at the end of the day, this is Russian roulette. Whether or not you are affected doesn't necessarily mean the person next to you won't be affected and may die. And so we have to protect everybody by not taking this, because it's not protecting you. It's not these, it's been proven they're not effective. So why take it? And they're not safe. And kind of lost my train of thought. But anyway,
Well,
yeah, but no, not to take it, not to take the mRNA vaccine, and not to let them continue with this, because this is what they want. They want these mRNA vaccines because this is going to be so lucrative that they think they can, use them. And, oh, I'm going to use it for this disease or that disease and that disease. Well, if it doesn't kill you, again, Russian roulette. And a lot of it also depends on, it's very unstable. You can't determine, which lot is going to have how much mRNA in it. My son's lot alone had like 30 or 40 deaths, and that was underreported in VAERS, so people died, and these things are killers.
yes, they are. They are killers, and we will not stop. We will not stop until these are finally removed from the market. And again, Hetty, I want to thank you for everything you've done in investigating your son's case and helping out the entire research community. That's actually one of the best case reports regarding these vaccines I've ever read, right? Because usually they do not stain for the spike, they do not look
Thank
for
you.
vaccine
And
components.
yeah,
Mm,
and I'm
Yeah,
going to
so
keep going, because I have additional tissue and blood, and I'm going to keep going. Yep.
well,
Yep.
we really are happy to have you on our team because this is fantastic work, and I will be sharing this paper wide so everybody can see exactly what does happen, what can happen at least when you do receive an mRNA injection. So, Hetty, again, thank you so much. I'm very sorry for your loss, but keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work, and thank you for the work of Dr. McCullough and everybody else working to end this nightmare.
Thank you.